In this video, I'm going to show you how to build an outdoor kitchen. So if you're new to this channel, my name's Josh. This channel is all about DIY to save a ton of money. So be sure to subscribe, ring that bell so you get notification every time I release a new video, and hammer that like button for me. That's all I ask in return for making this video. So we got a lot of great information to go over today, so let's get started. This is part one of a 4-part series from the How to Build an Outdoor Kitchen playlist. In this series, we will be building an outdoor kitchen in this space using the material that you see here to the left, and everything will be pressure treated lumber. Before starting any DIY project, be sure to check your local building codes to see if you need to comply with any specific building codes in your area. And also, always plan thoroughly before starting any project. As you can see here, I drew up all the elevations of this outdoor kitchen before purchasing any material. And this would be one side of the outdoor kitchen, this is the other, and then this is the other, along with my material list. And also I drew how I'm going to frame the top and the gas lines that I'll need to supply the outdoor appliances with propane. So with that being said, you may want to build your outdoor kitchen using metal studs or pressure treated framing material. I went with pressure treated framing material, but there's a little nuance I'm going to mention later in this video that you're going to have to do if you do go with wood as a framing material. So now that I got the outdoor kitchen sketched up, I got the appliances delivered, so I'm going to show you what I'm going to install for appliances. Now that you got your outdoor kitchen planned, your drawings done, your layout done, next you're going to want to order your appliances and framing material and all material to complete your project. And the reason why I think that's important is because you're going to need the dimensions of your outdoor kitchen appliances, access doors and drawers before framing up your outdoor kitchen. Without those on site, you could go off the installation guides that are available online before getting your appliances, but it's best just to take a tape measure and measure out the cutouts in which you're going to need to have done before you have the installation of your appliances complete. But you can go off the installation guide as well. That's totally up to you. Another important reason to get your appliances ordered ahead of time and on site is that if there's any dents or scratches on your appliances, you're going to want to address that with the manufacturer of those appliances so you can get new ones and replacement parts. So you're not waiting for that after your outdoor kitchen is built, because you're going to need those appliances before the outdoor kitchen's fully functional. So that's something you need to think about before starting your outdoor kitchen. If you're going to be using pressure treated material as a frame for your outdoor kitchen, which that's what I'm doing in this video, it is considered combustible because it is a wood product. And most outdoor kitchen appliance manufacturers sell what are called liners that you see here to my left. This will be where my 44-inch Napoleon grill is going to sit. And the reason why this liner is important is because it's going to protect the pressure treated material from any kind of heat. So because of that, I got to use the liner with all my appliances. So my griddle, my side burner, my 44-inch grill all have liners that are going to be installed first. Now, if I was not using combustible material such as metal framing of some kind, then I would not have to use the liners. So that's something you need to consider, because these liners are not cheap. And if you want to purchase any of these things that you see in this video, I'll put a link in the description below so you can check them out for yourself. Something else about these zero clearance liners is that they do have holes already cut in them for your electric and your gas lines. And I thought that's important to point out, because you need to make sure you have your orientation for your gas lines and electric and whatnot in line with those holes, because that's ultimately where they're going to enter and exit the appliance. I'm now going to begin framing for the outdoor kitchen. And just so you get a general sense of the layout here, we're going to have 24-inch framing width going right against this wall, and then it's going to run back here to a 6-foot section that's 24-inch framing as well. And then it's going to come over to this Peninsula that's going to have my side burner and griddle, and then it's going to have a little bar top here that's going to run just about up to that post. So as you can see, it's a very large outdoor kitchen. So as I'm framing this, I just wanted to give you a general idea of what I'm doing. Because I'm framing directly on top of this stamped concrete, there is some variation and some slope away from the building, which if you're building on a patio area, you most likely are going to have a slope as well. So consider that if you're going to be doing a concrete countertop like I'm going to be doing for this outdoor kitchen. So I want my top to be as level as possible, but if my base is not level, I'm going to have to build this in a sense to where I can adjust my top to make it perfectly level, and I want my framing to be secured tightly to the concrete. So keep that in mind. So I got a laser level here. I'm going to go ahead and turn that on, and we're going to check how level this area really is. So now that that's on, we're going to check with our tape measure and get the difference from this side of the outdoor kitchen in each corner to see how much of a slope there is. So if there's an exaggerated slope, we can take some of that out with the framing. So I'm going to pull this up here, and right now our laser is hitting right at 54 3/4, as you can see here on the tape. So I'm going to check back here on this corner. I got 53 3/4 here. Let me check over here. Here I got 53 3/4, so I'm level across the back here, but there is an inch difference between here and that edge. So we're going to measure here. And this back corner, we got about 54, as you can see there. So as a general sense, we're level across the back, and then it starts sloping down here, and then it has just a little dip in here. So we're going to take some of that out as we frame up the top, so it's enough I can get away with framing everything right to the concrete. Then I'll adjust the top once I get to that point to make it level. I'm going to take my chalk line and I'm going to chalk the layout onto the stamped concrete in which the outdoor kitchen is going to be framed up to. And this is going to be the outside of the 2x4 framing, not the sheathing, because we need a layout to actually secure our wall to directly. So I'm going to measure 25 inches off the bottom of this block wall to compensate for the thickness of this siding to give me the outside of my 2x4. And I'm going to snap the line. And I'm now going to put the same chalk lines around for the whole outdoor kitchen. I recommend using blue chalk here because red chalk is considered permanent and we don't want anything permanent on our concrete. As you can see, I now have chalked lines to the edge of the 2x4 framing around the whole layout of the outdoor kitchen. Now let me show you what I did change after seeing how this layout turned out. After placing the layout on the concrete, I noticed that the drain line for the plumbing pipe will work out better if I move the sink down more this way. So because of that, I'm going to shift the trash can, the drawers on this side, and then the one drawer to the right of the sink. So that way it's going to work out better for the layout. For this first section on the outdoor kitchen, I'm going to grab 4 16-foot long 2x4s that are pressure treated, and I want to make sure they're relatively straight. Anytime I put a layout for a wall, I need to make sure my plates are straight. In order to check to see how straight they are, we're going to eyeball down the pressure treated 2x4 like so, and that way you can eye and see how straight they are before using them. Very important. So I'm going to grab 4 of these and lay them out on my layout to mark them. I'm now going to line the edges of all 4 of these 2x4s right to the edge of where I want my framing to stop on this side of the outdoor kitchen. I'm now going to show you how to measure for your rough openings for your doors and drawers. So right here are 2 drawers that are going to go together. This is actually for a trash can, and this is actually a set of drawers. But if we measure across the front, we got 17 inches, as you can see here. We don't make our rough framing 17 inches wide because this is actually the face. We want our rough framing just to be a little wider than this part of the drawers. So we got 14.5 inches on this back, and we're going to add 1/4 inch to each side. So we're going to make our rough opening 15 inches wide. Now these 2 are actually going to go right beside each other like so. So we're going to make our actual width from back to back to house both of these, and then I'm going to put a 2x4 here to have a place to screw to in the center. The same also applies to our height. If I get a measurement here for the height, I got 25 3/4 inch. So I'm going to make my opening 26 1/4 inch. So that way we have a little bit of room for adjusting there as well. Here are my access doors for the outdoor kitchen, and right here, the same idea as the drawer. If you take a look back here, we got this lip that is actually going to be in the rough opening, and we take a measurement here. We got 33 1/4, so we're going to add a half, so 33 3/4 should be plenty width for that opening. Then we take a measurement of the height. We got 18 inches, it looks like, 18 1/4. So 18 3/4 inch is what I'm going to make the rough height for this door. So just so you know, that's all you got to do to frame out for your doors and drawers. I'm going to begin at the sink with the layout. The reason why I like to start at the sink is because the sink is the one you really can't move that much because of your drain line. And with that being said, I'm going to start here and marking where this drain line is going to hit right here, and that's going to be the center of my sink. I'm then going to take my framing square and square right off the edge of my 2x4s once they're tight together. And then I'm going to make a line here across all of them, and we're going to mark that as the center of the sink. And because that's center of the sink, that's also the center of our 36-inch door, the access door below the sink for the plumbing. So now I got to get my rough opening for the 36-inch door that's going to be placed here. Back here on this wall, we don't have to mark where our access doors are, just the front plates that's going to be for the front face of the outdoor kitchen layout. And it's smart to put your rough measurements on a piece of cardboard or paper so that way you have them for reference when you're doing your layout. Now I'm going to mark the rough opening of each one of those. Now after I mark the inside measurements of the rough opening, I'm going to take my square, make a square line up both sides of these, and then I'm going to put an X on the side we want our stud to be on. And then you can just scribble through here so you know not to put any full studs here when we're framing. Now we just repeat that process for the drawers on each side of the sink and the rough opening for the refrigerator. Something else you want to think about, like in this corner, I'm going to have stone veneer that's going to be 2 inches out, then a 1/2 inch for the sheathing that's on the wall first. So it's going to put me at 2.5 inches off this corner before the start. So that's where I'm going to have to key off of to get my center between my sink access door and the center where I want to place the center of the drawers that are going to be placed here. I'd like to point out that I did put the layout on the back wall as well, because the drawers are going to go back to here, which will put me into that wall. So I need to frame that out to house the drawer, unlike the sink access door. Now that my layout is on my plates, there's a couple things I'd like to mention. One thing is right here, I need to keep this open on this back wall for obvious reasons. So I placed the stud right here on each side of this on the back wall. And then with that being said, any open spans need to have a 2 foot on center at least layout for a stud. But right here I have so many things coming across this opening or this section of the outdoor kitchen that I didn't really have to add any more additional studs. Now here later we have some open runs where I'll show you how to do a 24-inch on center layout or a 16-inch on center layout, just so you see both. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and cut this to length. Because I want my finished framing height to be 35 inches, just like base cabinets in a house, if we measure up 35 inches, that puts us right here off the concrete. So we then got to subtract for the 2 plates. So we take that 35 inches, that puts us at 32 inches. And then if we subtract the 3.5 inch top that I'm going to build, and I'm going to build this so where the 2x4s are placed upright like floor joists, because that's going to give us a stronger finish and the ability to level up the top, because I'm going to be doing concrete countertops, so being level is important to me. So because of that, we subtract another 3.5 inches for that. So now that puts us at 28.5 inches is what we need to make our stud height. I need to cut 24 studs, and because there's so many, I set up my miter saw with a stop, so that way I can feed my pressure treated 2x4 through and cut multiple cuts using the stop quickly. This method is only used where the concrete is fairly level. I will show you later on how to cut the studs where the concrete is not fairly level. I'm going to build the back wall first, so I'm going to use these first 2 plates as something to pad it up off the concrete because I don't want a nail to veer down and hit my stamped concrete. So that's going to work well to cushion that. And then I'm going to use these plates and make the wall. So I'm first going to lay all this out. The nails I'll be using to put the framing together are these 3 1/4 galvanized ring shank nails. These are for exterior use and can be used in pressure treated. Very important to note. In order to fasten the studs, we simply line our stud up on the X that indicated the side of the line the stud was to be placed. We're going to line it right up on that line and nail it together. So I like to put 3 nails in with each stud. Then again, go to the next one, do the same. We go down this side, then we'll go to the other side and do the same thing. For each set of drawers and the trash can holder, I need to put a support in the bottom and a nailer or some place to screw to at the top. So I'm going to come up 4 inches off the bottom and make a mark, and that's where I want the top of the support going. And then over here I got to do the same thing on these drawers because they're going to actually come back into here. So I'm going to do that. And now for the access doors, I'm going to come up 8 inches. So instead of 4 inches, it's going to be 8 inches on those, just to make them more centered with the height of the outdoor kitchen. So I'm going to cut these blocks now and go in between, and these measurements are going to be the same as the rough measurements for when I laid this out. So I'm going to cut those now. Now going to stand these short walls up into place, and I would like to mention that right here I'm going to cut this top plate off once it stood up because this needs taken out because this is where the refrigerator is going, and there can't be anything in the way because that's going to go right up to the bottom of the concrete countertop. Now with that being said, I'm going to leave the rest of them on for now because we can cut them easily later because it won't be up against the siding like this one will be. So we're going to stand these up now. I'm now going to anchor the bottom plate to the concrete, and I'm going to do so using what's called a ram set. The ram set will just be placed right up against this plate. Then once it's loaded, we hit it with a hammer, and it uses a 22 caliber charge in order to power these 3-inch galvanized nails right down into the concrete, and it's going to keep it from shifting left or right or whatnot. So you could also use what's called a Tapcon, where you drill it out that it drives right into the concrete. You could do that as well. Whatever you have that will work, use it. So I'm going to go ahead and load this up and secure it. And I'm also going to make sure I'm nice and plumb where I'm sitting when I'm tight up against the siding, which right there looks really good. So it's going to be anchored right where it's at. And I'm also flushed up with the line that's the one we made earlier to indicate the end of the outdoor kitchen. So I'm going to do that now. In order to load this, we're going to place the nail right at the top, and then we're going to open it up, and that's where we place our charge. So we're going to slide it right down in here and then shut it. And I always use ear and eye protection with these because they're really loud. And now I'm going to just push it tight against that wood and hold it and hit right on top of the ram set. So as you just heard, that's really loud, but I'm going to do that every couple feet down the wall. I could have attached a ledger board against the structure instead of building this wall, but the reason why I did that is so I did not have holes in the siding if I ever decided to remove the outdoor kitchen for whatever reason. So it's future proof. In order to finish up the ends of this run, I got to build a little wall on this side and the other side to cap it off. I'm now going to begin building this section of the outdoor kitchen. Now this is what I'm going to do to avoid having a bunch of shim to level up this top. Is I got my laser level on here now, and it's casting a level line to the highest point that I found on this elevation. The laser is just touching the point here. Then the rest of the laser is cast around to where this is definitely the highest point. So now that I know my laser is at the highest point, I'm going to measure up onto this double plate because this is going to represent the two plates of this wall. So if I measure up, my laser right here is hitting right at 29 1/4. A laser level is essential for this process. If you want to see the exact one I got, check out the links in the description below. The wall that I'm about to build is going to hold the griddle and the side burner. Now there's two important measurements we need to get. The width, just like we did for the drawers and access doors, and also we need to allow room for this to drop down into the wall. So we need to think of how thick our countertop's going to be and how thick the support is that's going to hold the countertop in this case. And remember that I'm going to be framing with 2x4s up on the side, so that's 3.5 inches. Then my countertop is going to be 1 5/8 inches thick with the concrete countertop. So if you add those two together, we got 5 1/8. So now we need to measure how much distance that we have here that needs to sit down into the wall. So if we take a measurement here, we got 7 1/8. We need to allow for this to sit comfortably on top of the countertop. So with that being said, we take the 7 1/8 and subtract the 5 1/8, and that gives us 2 inches that we got to drop down when we frame this wall to compensate for this to go in. And if you're not framing the top with the 2x4 up on its side like I am, then you would just allow for the countertop thickness. So it all depends on how you're doing your framing. So on the side burner, if we take a measurement here, we got 10 3/8. So if we subtract the 5 1/8, that gives us 5 1/4 inches we need to drop down into our wall to compensate for this. So we need to make sure we do that when we frame this wall. I'm now going to use my plans to lay out this wall. And then after I lay it out, I'm just going to cut the studs and build it in a similar fashion to which we did this elevation. So I'm just going to time lapse this little portion of it. Here I'm cutting each stud custom to the height of the concrete because it is not level. And when I'm doing this, I'm stepping on the two plates together so that they're sandwiched tight below. So when I get the measurement to the laser, it's going to be very accurate. Also, the laser is set at the same exact height as the first elevation of the outdoor kitchen that we already have built. Once I set up the wall that's going to house the griddle and the side burner, I'm now going to frame out the opening to support the front of them. Before I get any further, I'm going to check to make sure I'm running level from here to here, because as you just seen, I custom cut all these studs across this wall because again, the concrete's not perfectly flat or level. I'm going to take a 10-foot 2x4 with my 4-foot level on top just to double check. And if we take a look across here from this point to this point, as you can see, it's perfectly level using this 10-foot 2x4 from this side of the outdoor kitchen to this side, which again is critical for me since I'm doing the concrete countertops. Now, if you're not doing concrete countertops, a little more forgiving. So then we're going to check going down this whole run. So I just wanted to illustrate to you that custom cutting the studs is actually a really good idea because it's important to get this nice and level. Looking good, looking good, looking good. And everything checks out really well. So We're nice and level across here. Now I'm going to use this as a straight edge to custom cut my studs to fit in for this wall where the 44-inch grill is going to sit. I got my 2 plates that's going to be for this wall. I'm going to lay this right here on the exact area where it's going to sit. I'm now going to get my stud height, simply measuring between here and the 2 plates put together, and that's going to be the same idea that we used earlier with the level. So we got about 29 inches there, 29 1/4 there, 28 7/8. So as you can see, it's going to take that slope out as we go. Essentially, the 2x4 going from elevation to elevation works as if it was a laser level to measure up to. I'm now going to build the wall that's going to correspond with this wall to support the countertop. Now with this wall, it's very easy because we're just going to do a 2-foot on center layout. So the first thing we need to do is get the total length of this wall to match it. And this from the last one is 15 foot 8 5/8. So I just got to cut my plates 15 foot 8 5/8 and put my 2-foot on center layout on it. I got my 2 16-foot pressure treated plates here. I'm going to pull off this end and come down here and mark 15 and 8 5/8. I'm going to mark 15 foot 8 5/8 inch right here. And something important to note, these plates are flush with each other at the other end of the boards. Very important, because when we cut these, we want to make sure they're both the exact same length. Then take my speed square, I'm going to mark both of these at the same time. Then we're going to cut on that side. We're now going to put our layout on these boards. In order to do the 2-foot on center layout, we lay our tape hooked to the end of the plates. And we got the 2-foot mark here, so we simply just come back 3/4 of an inch and then make an X right on 2 foot, because that's where our stud's going to sit. So that gives us 2 foot on center. So now at the 4-foot mark, come back 3/4 of an inch, so it's 47 1/4. Put an X right on 4 foot and repeat that process down the whole wall. Now with my plates pressed tightly together, I'm simply going to take my speed square and make a line across both of the 2x4 plates at the same time. So now we do that across all those marks. We're now going to stack these plates together and then sit them right on the line and get our laser level out to get our stud height so we can mark them so everything's level with the other part of the outdoor kitchen. If you do not have a battery-powered framing nailer, a pneumatic framing nailer, or just a simple hammer can be used to sink the nails. If you're going to use a hammer, I recommend 16-penny fully galvanized nails. Ring shank is a plus if you can get them, but not totally necessary. The last thing I need to do for the stud framing of the walls is add supports in between these 36-inch access door openings. That's because the weight of the countertop is going to transfer down to these little 2x4 headers. It's just going to add a little bit extra strength, not a significant amount, but it's something that I should do if I see that now. How I will be framing the countertops later on in this video will hold most of the weight. This is just nice additional support. This is a special plywood. This is pressure treated plywood, just like the pressure treated frame material we've been using. And the thing that this is going to do is give us a place to screw our stone veneer to, and it's also going to square up and secure this framing. As you can see, you can rock this right now. That's because there's no sheathing on it to hold it square. And it's also something that we're going to have to do before we get any further to secure this framing. I'm now going to switch my framing nails to the 2 3/8 inch galvanized ring shank nails, and these are more suitable for nailing on plywood. I'm going to install the 1/2 inch plywood on this section first. So I'm going to have my countertop overhang here for a bar. So because of that, I'm going to stop my sheathing flush with the top. All I'm going to do is take a measurement right up to the top of that plate, and I got 32 5/8 here. So I'm going to subtract about a 1/2 inch because I don't want my plywood coming in contact with the concrete, just because the plywood is susceptible to wicking the water up off the concrete. So we're going to leave a little gap there so air can go under there smoothly. So we're going to cut these 32 inches should be sufficient for this application. To rip down the plywood, I'm simply going to measure up 32 inches off this edge and make a mark, and then do the same on this side. I'm now going to take my chalk line and hook it onto that edge of the plywood at that mark. Then I'm going to strike from point to point. Now that's going to be what we need to rip it down to. I'm now going to slide a 2x4 under this side of the plywood to elevate this so I don't cut into the plywood underneath. I'm now simply going to rip right down that chalked line. Something else to note about the pressure treated plywood, you have a side that does not have writing on it. Then you have this side that does have writing on it, as you can see down below. I always put the writing towards the inside of the structure, just so you know. Right. And like I mentioned, this plywood is going to be used to square this up because this is not sitting perfectly square at the moment. So first thing we need to do is nail just right at the top of this plate, because that's going to give us our first straight edge, and then we're going to have to shift it to get it plumb and then nail the edge. So I first need to get it flush with this top and elevate it off the concrete. That looks good there, and we'll tack it. Now we'll come down here and do the same. And because we did the 2 foot on center layout, this is breaking right in the center of this stud. Now we're going to nail this off every 6 inches across this top. I'm now going to take my 4 foot level, hold it against this edge, and then shift it to where it's plumb, so right there. As you can see, the level's nice and plumb. And then we're going to secure this edge here, and that's going to hold it square as we nail it off. And now we just nail every 6 to 8 inches in the fields of the plywood and every 6 inches around the perimeter like I just showed you. And now we just continue that same process around this edge here. The stone veneer that we'll be installing later on in this video series requires plywood as a substrate to screw to. That is why I'm using this type of material for a substrate, but you could also use cement board if you're using something such as tile or even some stone veneer to attach it to. The grill, the side burner, and the griddle all require natural gas or propane. And because of that, I could just use propane tanks below each one behind the access door. But I'm going to do how I did my house is I'm going to run black iron pipe to each appliance. I'm just going to use a trunk and branch system, a 3/4 inch trunk and then branch to the 1/2 inch tees. And this is going to be a reducing tee at each appliance. And then I'm going to have a shutoff valve ultimately there going to each appliance with a regulator at the beginning of the whole system. So it's going to come out of a 100-pound propane tank, go to a regulator that's going to drop it down to about a 1/2 pound of pressure. And then it's going to feed the system to all the appliances at that 1/2 pound of pressure. Now, with that being said, do not do any type of running your own gas lines or anything of that nature. Definitely get a professional for that. In my jurisdiction, I got the building permit for this building and I can do it myself, and I have a lot of experience working with black iron pipe for gas lines. So definitely hire a professional for this part. Now I'm going to do a time lapse of doing it, so I'm not going to get into too much detail. Then I'll give you a walkthrough of it when it's done. Black iron pipe is typically meant to be used indoors, Because this outdoor kitchen is under a roof, and also this black iron pipe will be underneath the countertop obviously, so I do not have to worry about a lot of weather getting to it. And I'm also going to treat it later on in this video so it withstands the elements a little bit better, any type of moisture that may hit it. So that's something to keep in mind when watching this black iron pipe installation. To give you some context of what I'm doing here, I'm putting together two different runs of the black iron pipe on top of this 4x8 sheet of plywood. It's going to be much easier to pre-build as much as I could before getting between the two walls of the outdoor kitchen, because it's very tight in that space. So doing that will let me work much more efficiently and much better and get better fittings that way as well. So after I got the two runs put together, I placed the one run in the one side of the outdoor kitchen, then put the other one and threaded it into place. And then I tightened that up all the way. Then after I got that put together, I drilled a hole out through the side and placed the one end that's going to exit the outdoor kitchen, that's going to ultimately go to the propane tank. And then I leveled up the black iron pipe and anchored it using strapping so that it's held into place for when it needs to be used. After I rough in my gas lines, I always make sure I pressure test the rough end, and I do that by placing this gauge with a valve stem here, and then I fill it up with 100 pounds of pressure, and this only gets a half pound of pressure ultimately in these lines, but I figured if I test them at 100, they can surely handle a half pound. So to make sure this system passes, I gotta pressure test it. As you can see, we got 100 pounds of pressure here, and I let that sit for at least overnight to make sure our lines are good to go. I have a stub out right here that's going to be for the griddle, and I put that in position so it's about where it comes out of the griddle. And then the same here for the side burner. I stubbed the gas line up here because it's about where it comes out of the side burner. Then it goes back and elbows onto this elevation. And then the next stop is right here up to the 44-inch grill. And then we're going to stub out where we're going to put our 100-pound tank and regulator. So that's all there was to roughing in the gas lines. I'm now going to install two receptacles. Again, don't do electrical if you're not qualified or don't have the proper permits. I got the proper permits here to do this. So I'm going to jump out of a receptacle and run it over to power the next two receptacles around this outdoor kitchen. In order to power the two receptacles for this outdoor kitchen, I am jumping out of an outlet that's directly above the outdoor kitchen, as you see here. That circuit is protected using a 20 amp GFCI breaker, so I do not have a GFCI receptacle because it's protected via the breaker coming out of the panel box. And also, this is 12-2 wire. The 12-2 wire is meant to handle 20 amps. The last thing I'm going to do before I frame the top is address these plumbing pipes. There's two things I got to do here. One is install a Studer vent here. This works as a one-way valve because my nearest pipe that's going up to the roof is too far away for me, and I want to place this here so that way we siphon air in and it will let the sink drain properly. So we're going to install that, and then we're going to install an adapter here that's going to get the P-trap that's coming from the sink here. And again, all this is much easier to do now before this top's on. So I'm going to do that now. All right, the rough plumbing's done here, and if you'd like to see how I wired and plumbed this whole garage, check out the video link in the top right-hand corner of the screen. I'll walk you step by step how I actually built this whole garage as well. Before framing the top, I'm going to clean up as much as I can behind the walls because it's going to be easier now than later. It's now time to begin the framing process for the concrete countertops, and this framing process can be used also for granite countertops or any countertop you're doing. But I just wanted to illustrate that it's important to have it really level if you're going to be going with the concrete countertops, because we're going to have to form this in the next video. So with that being said, I'm going to bring the edge of my framing out flush with the sheathing because I'm going to be doing stone veneer and I want it to run up the same plane. And if I do that, it avoids me from having to put pieces of plywood around the outside edge of the overhang for the bar area. So now what I'm going to do is get my layout just like I have for these openings here for the griddle and side burner in this case. And also something else I got to think about is I'm going to be using 1/2 inch cement board, and it comes in 5 foot long sheets. And because of that, I need to make sure I have a nailer at 5 foot to be able to secure the edge of the cement board too. So with those things in mind, I'm going to begin cutting these studs or joists to hold the concrete countertops. And again, these are going to be 2x4 pressure treated studs, just like we did with the walls, except we're going to be going 16 on center or closer in some cases, because I want to make sure I have a nice sturdy top. So I'm going to begin laying out for this concrete countertop. If I'm coming off the edge, I'm going to be coming out 5 foot and then coming back 3/4 of an inch. So I know I need a stud right there. And then we're going to do the 16 on center layout here. So we find our 16 mark. Then we're going to come back 3/4 of an inch. So now I'm going to come off this 5 foot mark to continue the layout. Because the 16 on center works great for 4 foot and 8 foot material, but 5 foot is a little abnormal in the framing world. So because of that, I have to do this kind of odd layout. So if you're going to be using 1/2 inch pressure treated plywood, you can just continue your 16 on center layout. And the 1/2 inch plywood is great for strength, but I think durability and longevity, being outdoors, cement board is superior. Yeah, it doesn't have near the strength for the overhangs like the plywood, but again, long term, it really doesn't matter because I'm going to have concrete that's going to be supporting the countertop ultimately. Now my next piece of cement board breaks here, so I'm going to make sure to mark it here. All right, I'm now going to cut a plate to length just like we did on this wall here. We're going to lay it here to put our layout and to cut our other plates that go here. I now need to calculate the length of the supporting 2x4s for the countertop. And again, this is going to have an overhang for a bar area. And because of that, I need to compensate for my overhangs. And with that being said, I want a 3-inch overhang on each side, because I got stone veneer going around this, which it has a 2-inch thickness because it has a built-in rain screen, but I'll show you that in the following videos. But because of that, I need to allow the overhang as well over that. So I got a 3-inch overhang because I want a 1-inch overhang over the stone. And then I got to think about the sheathing I got to put on this side of the wall yet. And this side will not have sheathing on this 2x4 support because, like I said earlier, I want it to come out flush and not have to pad it with sheathing around the perimeter. So this side will still get it yet. So with that being said, I need to subtract the 6 inches for the 3-inch overhang on each side, then a 1/2 inch for the thickness of the sheathing here. So that gives me 41.5 inch that I need to cut these supports that go in between. So ultimately, after this is finished, I'll have a 51-inch wide countertop. A concrete countertop that I will be doing in the next video can cantilever 12 inches without support, but I will be supporting this concrete countertop with the 2x4, so it technically is not cantilevered at all because of that. Before nailing the countertop supports together, I must first decide how deep I want to install this grill, and that goes for all the grills, the big grill, the side burner, and the griddle. I need to determine how far I want this part to stick out. Like I mentioned before, I got 2-inch thick stone and I still have sheathing going on the wall yet, so I gotta take 2.5 inches back if I want this flush. Another thing about these liners, you could install this countersunk down into the countertop, or in my case, I'm installing it right on top of the countertop, on top of the finished countertop like I measured for earlier, just so you know. So now I'm going to measure back 2.5 inches and make a mark, and then that's how deep the pocket needs to be for this top framing. To this mark is how deep the framing has to be for the countertop. So I'm going to measure up to that mark. I got 19 3/4. So if I make it 20 inches, that's going to be perfect for this. And again, all of the appliances are going to have their own measurements. The width of the block to support the back side of the griddle, side burner, and grill is the same width as the rough openings that we did here earlier. That's for the liner. So I'm simply just going to get those measurements and cut blocks and then nail these back to the correct distance to give me the finished measurement that I want. After discussing the placement of the liner further with my wife, she decided she did not want the liner flush with the stone and wanted it flush with the end of the countertop, which actually probably would be a better look, so I did end up padding out the block a little bit further. I'm going to finish studding this in where the appliances are going to be, and I'm just going to continue my 16 on center layout off this near stud, or joist I should say. So I'm going to measure over 16 to the edge now and continue that layout on this section. And then we got to cut them to the length. Also want to let you know, to shoot this together, I switched to the 3 1/4 framing nails like we had when we framed up the walls. Because I'm going to remove the tapered edge off the cement board when I install it in the next video, I got to allow to subtract 2 inches off the cement board on this side because of that. And now if I measure up to 34 inches, I'm going to mark that right here. So right off the edge I'm at 31. Then I'm going to put blocking across here to catch the lip of the cement board. But what I could have done was just break these on 3 foot on center, so I could have laid my cement board long ways, but hindsight's better than foresight, so I just got to add some blocks in between these 16-inch spans. The tight spans, I don't have to worry about it, just so you know. I'm going to take my framing nailer and nail up from under here into this in order to hold it into place and make sure we're flush right along the face of this wall. On this side where the overhang is, I'm going to make sure I get this flush with the edge of this wall, and I'm also going to get the measurement that's from the inside of this countertop to the edge of the wall. Right here is 29 inches. Now we know this is where it should be because we already put the sheeting on and got it plumb. So as we go across here, we're just going to toenail down into this knee wall in order to hold this top where it belongs and get our 29-inch measurement along the way, so we know this wall is sitting the correct distance away from the wall here. All right, as you can see, that's nice and secure and nice and strong. I like that. So before I try to fine-tune leveling this with shims or anything of that nature, I know it's really close where it's at, but I'm going to finish framing the rest of the countertop before I start adjusting anything, just because I need to find the highest point of all of the countertops. So now I'm going to go ahead and continue framing this in a time lapse. Here is a construction tip that I learned from framing houses. If you have a wall that is racked and hard to get plumb, if you hook a ratchet strap and pull it in the direction that you need to plumb the wall, you can tighten that up and unrack the wall fairly easy using a ratchet strap like you've seen here. On this section of countertop, I got a sink, and this is a undermount sink, and it's technically supported by the framing that's underneath of the countertop. It ain't going to be sitting right on the wall like this. I still got a frame like the other countertop. So there's something to consider. On the back end is going to be the faucet. And because of that, I need to be able to reach in to tighten up the faucet and install it. So therefore, I'm going to have to cut part of this wall off right here to give me some room to reach up in and install the faucet. So I'm going to cut out this back section here, and that's going to allow me to install it properly. When it comes to building the frame for this, it's the same idea as the appliances. We got to cut a frame to support this lip of the sink. Something else I'm going to do is I'm going to rip down this wall to about 1 inch in this section here, because after getting some measurements, my sink might be too far back if I go off this because of the thickness of the stone and then the overhang. So I don't want to have to reach into the sink like that. So I'm actually going to rip all of this down to compensate for the sink just in the section where the sink's going to hit. So I'm going to do that and then frame out. Ripping the wall down like you see here to make it thinner does not hurt the structural integrity, simply because of the design of the framing. And also, whenever I frame the countertops, it's going to take the weight and distribute it on each side of this opening anyway, so there's nothing to worry about there. And also, I could have got a smaller sink and not have cut that wall down if I really wanted to, but again, it does not hurt anything, so I did not mind doing that. Now, since I cut that down a little thinner, I brought this out more closer to our body. Whenever we are working at the sink, if we sit this in here, as you can see, that's ultimately about where it's going to be sitting after it's installed. So once we get all this installed, we'll set the sink in the next video along with the cement board. So for now, I'm going to finish up the little piece of countertop that's at the end and then sheet all around this outdoor kitchen. If you're wondering why I chose to use pressure treated lumber over metal studs or anything else, is because the price of pressure treated lumber is so affordable. I built this whole outdoor kitchen framing with only $1,500 in material, so you can't really beat that for the amount of square footage of this outdoor kitchen. But the only drawback to using pressure treated material is, like I mentioned before, is you have to use those zero clearance liners with the appliances. So depending on how many appliances you have, it might get costly. I have about $1,500 in liners, so that's something to consider if you want to use pressure treated material for framing. I'm going to fine-tune the leveling of the countertop framing, and to do so, I have my laser level here, and I'm going to turn it on, and then whenever I find the highest point, I'm going to key off that in order to get the countertop framing nice and level. I had the laser set approximately 2 inches above the countertop framing. All I have to do now is go through with my tape measure and measure off the top of the framing, and right here I got a roughly 2 inches. And now I'm going to see what my smallest measurement is, because that's going to be the highest point. For instance, if I have 2 inches here, then back here I have 1 7/8 inch, then that means that's the highest point. So I'm going to go around the perimeter of this countertop framing and find that. If you don't have a laser level, you could always use a 4-foot level and just check around the edges. It does the same thing, except it's much easier to use the laser. So after checking around for the countertop height, my highest point is right here. So it's within 1/8 around this whole framing job, so that's actually really good. I could probably just leave it where it's at and be totally fine. Here are the shims I'll be using. These are what are called composite shims. These will not rot or be destroyed by moisture by any means. Underneath of here will not get much moisture at all. This is a little bit overkill, to be honest with you. Cedar shims would probably work just fine, but figured I'd be extra precautious, so I'm going to be using these shims. So all we have to do here is measure up, and as you can see, we got 2 inches there. Then over here, we got about 2 1/8. So we need to shim this side up just a little bit. So in order to get this lifted up, all we have to do is pry this up with our pry bar, because we did nail it, but we needed it secured. And I'd like for you to know I did not nail the sheathing into this side of the frame yet, because I knew I'd have to level this up. So let me pry this up just a little bit. So I'm just going to place my pry bar right here underneath of this 2x4. So I simply just got to go up until my 2-inch mark is achieved. And I'm going to come back here and pry up on this one a little bit because this whole front needs raised up just a little bit. Okay, now as you can see, we got 2 inches here, 2 inches here. Now we just got to secure underneath of here using the composite shims. This part's very straightforward. You simply slide the shim in until it becomes tight. And as you can see, it really didn't need shimmed up that much, but right there is where we need it. And all we have to do is break the shim. All right, so we're secured there, and do the same on this side. Now we are level in this area. So I can simply shoot the outside of the sheathing now to hold it even more securely. And then we do that around the whole parameter of the framing. As you will notice in this time lapse, I used a 4-foot level in conjunction with the laser. That way I could get everything almost exactly level. Also, around the sink, the grill, the side burner, and the griddle, I made sure to take a little extra time there because that's where my appliances are sitting. So it's very crucial to have that perfectly level. We now have all of the framing perfectly level, so we can now secure it and move forward. I'm now going to finish nailing off the last 3 inches of the sheathing around the outdoor kitchen. When I was framing this garage and wiring it, I always planned to build this outdoor kitchen, so I predetermined where to place my receptacles. Up here is going to be for the TV. Over here are for receptacles for obvious reasons at the countertop. Then I have a receptacle down here that's going to be for the refrigerator. So planning ahead of time is very crucial to having a nice final product. Another thing I'd like to mention in this video is that I will be installing these 2 vents, one on this side and then one on this side more than likely. But I'm not going to cut them out of the sheathing yet because I want to keep the water out as much as possible until I'm ready to put the stone up. So I will be doing that later. And the reason why you should have vents is because if there is some kind of little propane leak or even gases just in general, it gives you a vent so the air can wick through the outdoor kitchen and even remove some moisture, that type of thing. So it's important to vent your outdoor kitchen. I'm now going to cut out for the doors and drawers, and it's always helpful to use a 1/2-inch bit to drill out at a corner first before using your Sawzall to cut around. It's just easier to start that way. I'll be the first to admit a Sawzall does not leave the cleanest cut around these openings. So if you really want a nice clean cut, I recommend you punching a nail from the inside out to mark the corners of the openings, and then hook that chalk line to those nails and then snap the inside edges of the opening, and then use your circular saw to cut it out. That way it'll be a nice clean cut. When I was cutting out for the doors and drawers, I realized that this drawer still needed the top cut out of it because I could not frame it up until I had the top on. Because of that, I do have to cut about 1 inch out of that 2x4 framing that is for the countertops. No big deal, but I just thought I'd let you know I had to do that. I'd like to point out that this has been sitting for 3 days, and as you can see, it has not moved at all. I would say that pressure test has passed. Like I mentioned earlier in this video, I'm going to add a layer of protection onto the black iron pipe using Rust Stop. This again is just a little extra protection. I'm not expecting it to do miracles under extreme weather, but under this outdoor kitchen countertop, I think it's going to do just fine. So I'm going to wipe it off really good and get all the grease and debris off the pipes with shop rags, and then I'm going to go through and apply 2 coats of Rust Stop to it. I think it's going to give me some long-lasting protection. If you would like to see how I'm going to do this massive concrete countertop pour, check out this video. It'll help you out.